What's up, guys? Dylan here from The Unbiased. Please like, subscribe. We try to cover the news in an unbiased way. My last video was about why there will be a civil war in the United States. This video is going to look at why there won't be a civil war in the United States. And I just found some of these pictures that I think represent the U.S. a lot better than most of the stuff you see on the news. Most Americans are following their dreams. Most Americans are hardworking, and most Americans live by color blindness. They try not to see color, and that's a good thing. And they judge you as an individual. Most Americans do. There are crazies on the left and the right, of course. I went over them in my last video. But I think, to start, I just want to say I think most Americans are decent people, and that gets lost today. But I want to look at it a bit more in a bit more exacting fashion as to why a civil war probably won't come to the United States. I want to look at some data, some surveys, and you might say the data here is cherry-picked because I'm trying to find indications that the war won't come. Okay, that's what I was looking for in this video. And I think one of the first reasons it won't come here is because the United States is technologically advanced. And as technology advances, historically, quality of life has just gotten better for the public. Now, there are some downsides to this. We know about automation, AI's facial recognition when it first rolled out. A lot of reports that it was miscategorizing people of color. So there are problems, obviously, with technology, but I think overall it's been a net gain. And if technology keeps increasing at the rate it increases, we can hope that this will actually improve the life of the average American even more, especially those at the bottom rung. There, of course, there is the possibility that AI and automation will make things worse, but we don't know. It's possible that if technology keeps advancing, life in America will just keep getting better and better. Okay, number two, another reason I think things are going to get better in the U.S. and there won't be a civil war is while there is wealth inequality, poverty has really dropped in the United States. There's a study by Bruce Meyer and James Sullivan. In this study, they look at consumption rather than income. So if you look at poverty based on the amount of goods and services people consume, and you compare 1980 to 2018, in 1980, 13% of the population in the U.S. was at the poverty line. And today it's 2018, 3%. Now, of course, coronavirus may spike that a little bit. So things are really good as far as being poor and being able to buy things, your purchasing power. I had another, this chart is just fascinating here. It's from the American Enterprise Institute. So what they did here is they looked at the retail price of objects in 1959, 1973, and 2013, and it's just fascinating. So look at this. A washing machine in 1959 was $210. And for the average person to afford a washing machine, they had to work 100 hours to pay for that washing machine. Okay. By 1973, the washing machine price went up to $285, and the average person had to work 72.2 hours to afford the washing machine. In 2013, the washing machine was $450, and people keep saying, wow, the prices keep going up and up and up, outpacing the rate of inflation, some say. But the average hours worked to buy this washing machine was 23 hours. It's really crazy. Really good news. There's a lot of good news that doesn't get reported, and you can see this is true for everything here. Color TV was 127 hours of manpower, hours worked in 1959. It was 100 hours in 1973, and only 20 hours of work to get a color TV that was $400. And really impressive. You can see the same thing with cell phones. The cell phone that cost $800 or $500 when it first came out in 2007 is probably $100 now. And for $500 now, you get something that's vastly more powerful than what came out in 2007, and the price is pretty much the same. The other reason, and let me make one more point. I think if you were an alien and you came down to the United States in 1950 and you visited and you flew over the houses and the suburbs and you went into some apartments in the city, in the inner city and out in the country, and then you came back in 2020 and you did the same thing, you'd be amazed because most houses in 1950 had one car, now they have two or three. Most homes had one TV, now they have three, four, or five. So things are generally getting better. And if you take that wide-angle view and you look at the timeline, you can see things generally improving. It doesn't mean there aren't challenges, but there are some very good indications that the United States is stable. And I want to talk about political stability, and I think that's really important to the future stability of our nation. That if our political system stays stable, then our relations will stay stable. We won't drift into a civil war. Let me read this right here. It's somewhat interesting. In political systems such as the United States, for example, subtle shifts in the function and relative power of different institutions are continuously being made and over time produce entirely new structures and very different patterns of institutional behavior. It is a result of this process that the presidency has accumulated a range of powers, new powers, that have given it primacy among the branches of American government. This process also explains the growth of administrative agencies that perform both legislative and judicial functions. This process of dynamic adjustment is crucial for institutions that remain static in a changing society are unable to serve as agencies of evolutionary change. Now, I disagree with some of this. I think the power at the executive branch has grown too formidable. But the general idea is that the United States political system is very stable and yet flexible. Now, it takes a while to make changes, but our founding fathers were really brilliant. They made our government very bulky for a reason. It's bulky, it's big, it's slow to change. It doesn't turn agilely. It doesn't turn in an agile fashion, but it can take a knock, it can take a hit, it can take strain. The founding fathers had studied ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and they knew how power tends to aggregate, so they broke it up into these different branches. And it can take a lot of stress, like we're seeing now, and not break. The political stability here can keep the United States out of war. Another reason I don't think that things are going to break down into a civil war here is life satisfaction in America is very, very high. If you look at this Gallup poll, it says 9 in 10 Americans are satisfied with the way things are going in their personal life. A new high in Gallup's 4-decade trend. The latest figure bests the previous high of 88% in 2003. Now, this is from February 2020, right before coronavirus hit and right before George Floyd. So this idea that there's been all of this pent-up rage doesn't seem really to mesh with the surveys. Now, the surveys could be wrong. I admit that. But let's go with what we have here. And I also want to point out down here that among non-whites, what's the satisfaction rate? You can see satisfied to very satisfied. 86% are satisfied. These are non-whites. And 60%, approximately 60% are very satisfied. So you see, and even people who are making, where was this? Let me see. Under $40,000 a year, or 80% are satisfied, 54% are very satisfied. So people are generally happy in the United States. And I think that gets lost a lot when we talk about this country and we're prisoners of what's put on the news and what's in the media. Okay? So another good indication is 70% of Americans still believe in the American dream, that it's obtainable. I think there's a bit of confusion about the American dream. A lot of people tend to think that the American dream is you are guaranteed the house with the white picket fence. The American dream, I think the better understanding is you're given the opportunity. And I think that's where moderates and, slightly right, slightly left come together. It's like, okay, well, how can we help people who are disadvantaged or underprivileged make sure they have the same opportunity? Might not get the same result, but hopefully the same opportunity. While most Americans, 70%, continue to view the American dream as personally achievable, 29% tell Gallup that even by working hard and playing by the rules, the American dream is unattainable for them. Okay, so that's gone up a little bit, which isn't good news, but 70% is pretty high. It was 75% in 2009. So going down a little bit still, that's really high. You got 7 in 10 Americans who still believe the U.S. exists as a meritocracy. And there's just some good news about race relations as well that hardly make the news. This is from 2013. It's the latest I could find. But in U.S., 87% approve of black-white marriage versus 4% in 1958. 96% of blacks approve, 84% of whites approve. Now, I think we should try to get this higher, but when you're going from 4% up to 87% and 96% of blacks approve, this is good news. And The media should cover this. This isn't like washing over instances of racism or anything. It's giving people a fuller, deeper, richer view of what the United States is really like. Most Americans are good people who aren't going to judge you based on the color of your skin. I also found that most Americans, about 75% of blacks and about 80% of whites, think that blacks and whites get along pretty well together. 25% of blacks don't think race relations are great, and 16% of whites don't think race relations are great. But again, 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 Americans think whites and blacks get along fairly well. And this was from 2013. So this could have gone down with the George Floyd and obviously the riots. But I think if you take a poll in a time of heated passion, I don't know how well it reflects reality. I like the polls when there's not a lot going on as far as like racial tension in the news. I think it gives a truer picture of what Americans are actually like. But this is good news either way. Also, if you look at, let's look at this here. So when you look at, okay, so I can't find the exact study here, but I read somewhere that 82% of blacks, 82%, 8 in 10 blacks, think police relations are either excellent, good, or fair. I think it was 56% thought police relations in their neighborhood were excellent or good, and if you include fair, it goes up to about 82%. Only 18% of blacks said police relations were poor in their neighborhood, and that's good. That's really good news. And here, and I think this survey is really important. This is from 2016. It's do you see racism as a problem of an institution or as individuals? And whites, overwhelmingly, 70% think it's individual. Blacks think it's about 50% think it's individual, about 40% think it's institutional. Now, that's a big number, 40%, so we need to work on the institutional perspective on this. But 50% of blacks, according to a 2016 survey, it could have shifted obviously, don't think it's institutional. They think it's individual. And look, the point of bringing this up, it's not a monolithic. There's not a monolithic black community. There's not a monolithic black idea of what is and isn't institutional racism. A lot of black people, about 50%, think it's individuals are racist and not institutions. That's good news, and it doesn't make you someone who's bigoted to think likewise, right? I'm going to talk about systemic issues when I conclude here. Okay. I also want to touch on crime stats being way down. Another good indication that the U.S. is on the right track overall. You can see this chart of violent crime from 1960 to 2013. Just look at this chart. Peaks in 1990, drug war, crack epidemic. We could just see the peak, and it's just this precipitous drop going back to these 1960 levels before the war on drugs, and maybe we cancel the war on drugs or something like that goes down to this level. So crime's way down. Violent crime is way down. There's some stability in the U.S. that the media overhypes sometimes. The state has a monopoly on violence, and I think Steven Pinker I heard talk about this, and it goes back to Weber and different philosophers. Only the state has the right to take life, and we've moved away from a vendetta society. When the state has the right to take life and you don't necessarily, there stand your ground laws and you get the Second Amendment, but we typically, most people, even if they have a gun, they're first going to call the police. Okay, that's a big improvement in the world. It really is. To trust your government that much that you'd rather call them than take matters into your own hands. I think one of the reasons we have such a visceral reaction to seeing statues and things like that torn down, even if some of us think some of the statues should be torn down and some should remain up, is it feels like people are resorting to a violence that is not under state control. And that makes us worried. Of course, when the state has a monopoly on violence, bad things happen. George Floyd, certain wars, but it seems to be better than the alternative when you look at all of the when you look at the history and deaths, and when you look at the history of war and the history of crime. It seems to be going down as the state accrued more power. And of course, the danger is the state has all this power and then they turn against you, and that's why you have a Second Amendment, according to the right. Okay, what else is there that I think we should just also recognize how much the U.S. has changed, how many laws it's passed, we should look at how much civil rights legislation has passed, right? I mean, there's just tons of civil rights legislation. So the U.S. does change, and it can change through legislation, through peaceful protests, through making your voice heard. These things you really can make a change in the United States, but I stress again, it's a bulky, slow change. Why is it bulky and slow to change in the United States? Well, it helps prevent civil war, because just as fast as you want to pass a law that seems like common sense, something good, if you can pass a good law that fast, why couldn't someone who's evil pass a law that fast? So a lot of people don't understand the U.S. government is set up to be clunky because the founding fathers understood how volatile the populace can be, and how the majority, if you have direct democracy, can really pass some heinous laws, okay? Such as, well, we won't get into that, but in the U.S., there have been certain state legislatures that have passed laws that are reprehensible. Okay, and yeah, I think that's it. The idea that the U.S. is self-correcting is just so important to understand. You don't need violence to correct what's happening in the U.S. Large, consistent, peaceful protests can get the job done, especially if you come with moderate solutions to the problems and you pull independents in.